Okay, guys. So today we will continue working on the writing section. We started with this on Friday, and we're gonna be making up for what was that? Wednesday's class, right? We didn't have class due to the holiday, so today we'll continue working on the writing section. And well, remember that we said that in the writing section currently you have two different types of questions, right? And in the non-writing you have one extra one. So we have started working on question number 1, the integrated task. And today we'll continue. I remember that we already started to write the essay, right? If I'm not mistaken. So let me see. I don't know if we did. Okay, yes. So I don't know if you guys remember, but we're gonna quickly summarize what this was about. Remember, in the integrated writing, first thing you have to do is you read an article, right? This is the article that we read. It had 4 paragraphs, an introduction, the first paragraph, and 3 body paragraphs, right? We said that in the introduction, you have the main claim, which is the main opinion from the author, right? The author's main opinion. And in this case, this was about driverless cars. And the author was saying that these cars will have a positive impact on our driving experience, right? That was the main position that the author had. You have the main claim, the main opinion in the first, in the introduction, right? The first paragraph. And then in the body, you have 3 reasons supporting or proving that opinion, right? So in this case, we have 3 reasons why these cars will have a positive impact. The first one is safety. So the author says that these cars are safer than the normal ones. The second reason is the environment thing, because the author says that these cars are allegedly good for the environment. And finally, we have the time factor, right? And the author says that another advantage of these cars is that it will keep passengers' time. And then after you read, you remember that you get 3 minutes to read this, but the article won't go away, right? So you can even look at it or copy from it when you're writing your essay. So you read the article for 3 minutes, then you listen to the lecture. And in the lecture, the professor will be saying the opposite of whatever you had here, right? The professor will be responding to these points. So do you guys want me to play the audio again so that we are fresh and we can continue writing the essay? Or do you guys remember what it was about? Should we listen to it again?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. So we're gonna listen to it. Remember that the 3 arguments from the author why these cars will have a positive impact are because they are safer, supposedly, because they're good for the environment, and because they'll give passengers time, right? So with that in mind, I'm gonna play the lecture again. We already did it, but just so that it's fresh, since, well, we did this on Friday, right? So it's been 2 days. So I'm gonna play the lecture again. Please pay attention and take a few notes.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the same topic you just read about. A lot of people are very excited about driverless cars, but most of the media attention and praise ignores the problems with driverless cars. The author seems to believe that autonomous cars will cure all of our driving troubles, when nothing could be further from the truth. Take the idea that driverless cars will be safer. Remember, all computer software is designed by humans, so any type of automatic guidance system within driverless cars will be prone to error. For example, the driverless car mentioned by the author, the one that drove over 700,000 miles without an accident, actually hit another car just last month. It was all over the news because it makes everyone doubt just how safe driverless cars actually are. And what about the idea that driverless cars will reduce pollution? Well, some studies suggest that more people will begin to drive once driverless cars become available. Since people will no longer need a driver's license to get behind the wheel, age restrictions for both young and old will no longer matter. More people will be on the road, and it will increase the amount of cars. Pollution levels may actually increase with driverless cars, even if they drive in a more fuel-efficient manner. As for the extra time the driverless cars are supposed to give us, well, that may be such a benefit after all. You see, most people nowadays find driving relaxing. They enjoy driving their car while listening to music or talk radio. It's a welcome distraction from the usual routine. Once people start to use driverless cars, it becomes another space to do work or watch videos, which is how most people already spend most of their day. I'm afraid that this extra time in driverless cars will just be another way to work or waste time. Now, answer the question. Summarize the points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they cast doubt on the specific points made in the reading passage. You have 20 minutes to write.
Okay, guys. So we know that the professor objects to each point, right? The professor says these cars are not safer because they're designed by humans, that there was an accident with this car that was mentioned here. The professor also says that they're actually not good for the environment because of the number of cars will increase due to the lack of restrictions. And finally, that this time is useless, right? Since people are just going to use it to waste time, or they're just going to use it for things that we already do most of the day. So those are the points that the professor has, okay? And that's what we did last class. We're just reviewing a bit of what we did, right? Okay, guys, now let's get back to the essay. Remember we said in your essay, you guys should have a structure that's similar to the one we had in the article. So in the article, we had 4 different paragraphs. We had an introduction and 3 body paragraphs. And we were saying, we did the introduction, right? And what we said is in your introduction, you guys need to have 3 sentences, actually. In the first sentence, you should have some context, we said. And in this context, what you need to do is talk about the topic in general, in this case, autonomous cars, and explain a little bit about the topic so that you give the reader some context. So what we did was we said both the article and lecture discuss autonomous cars, right? A technology that allows vehicles to work on their own. So we have the topic, driverless cars, and we have an explanation of what the topic is, right? And remember that we extracted all of that from the article's introduction, right? We got it from the article. And finally, you needed to have 2 sentences where you contrast the professor's opinion with the article's, the author's opinion, right? So we say the reading extra claims that these cars will be highly beneficial and provides 3 arguments of support. So this was the reading's point, right? The article's point, that these cars are beneficial. And the second sentence, or the third sentence in this case, is the professor's main point, right? We contrast that and we say, however, the professor argues that the implementation of this technology might actually bring more problems than solutions, objecting each of the author's arguments. This is what we did, right? This is what we had so far. Basically, the introduction. Remember, we need to give some context, and then we need to contrast both ideas from the reading and the listening, using these transition words, using these reporting verbs, and using these transition phrases, right? We said that we are not supposed to summarize the reasons. That means we don't have to mention anything about safety or the environment or time here in the introduction. You're only going to mention that in the body paragraphs, right? Not in the introduction. And this is what we did. This is a summary of what we did on Friday. I don't know if you guys have some questions before we continue. Is there anything you'd like to ask before we continue? Is everything clear? No questions? Okay, guys. All right. So after the introduction, you need your body. Now in the body paragraphs, the structure for each body paragraph is exactly the same. Okay? So let's see how this has to be. In each body paragraph, you need to have the following sentences. The first sentence is going to be one sentence summarizing the article's point. Okay, if it's the first body paragraph, then the article's first point. If it's the second body paragraph, then the article's second point, depending on which body paragraph this one is, right? So one sentence when you summarize the article's point. Then you have to have another sentence where you contrast that point with the professor's response. So you have to summarize the professor's response to that point. Then you have to have another sentence where you explain further the professor's point or the professor's response. Okay? That should include details, examples, evidence, numbers, facts, whatever the professor mentions. Okay? Of course, you can have more than these, no problem. You could have another one more where you close the paragraph or where you continue explaining the professor's point. Okay? So ideally, guys, you should have 3 to 4 sentences, 3 to 4 sentences in each paragraph, in each body paragraph. You cannot have less than that. Of course, you can have more if you want, but honestly, you won't have enough time to write more than that. And it's not necessary to. So there's no point in writing more, you know? So the one thing that I just want you to remember and that I just want you to keep like to keep in mind is that the ratio should be like that. One sentence for the reading, one sentence where you summarize the article's point, the readings part, and you can have 2 or 3 sentences for the list. Okay, so it's even more than double what you have for the reading. One sentence for the reading and 2 or 3 for the list. Okay, that's the way that it should be. Please don't write more than one sentence for the article. You cannot do that because the main idea, the main points here are the ones from the professor, from the listening. So please don't waste your time writing a lot about the reading and not having enough details for the listening. Okay? Any questions so far?
Yeah, one question. So just to clarify, in every single time in this kind of exercise, we should always focus on the listening part, always.
Yeah, exactly. Any other question? Okay, guys. So let's do it. First sentence, we summarize the article's point, right? You always have a specific keywords. Remember how when we were reading the article, we were saying, I told you, try to always identify 1 or 2 phrases from each body paragraph where you have the main points. So I remember that we highlighted a few phrases, right? Like this one here was for the first one. These vehicles will be much safer. That was the main thing here. Same thing for the second, right? The main point is that they're good for the environment. And in the third part, this was the main point, right? That these cars will give passengers time. So you have those highlighted parts in your mind. Of course, you're not able to highlight them when you're taking a test, but you do have them in mind, right? You know where those phrases are. So what you guys are gonna do is you're gonna find those phrases and then paraphrase, okay? Of course, you can go a little bit beyond and explain it, but it has to be in only one sentence, okay? So if we are talking in grammar terms, then you can have two clauses if you want that make one sentence, but you cannot have more than two clauses. Clauses are basically those phrases that contain a subject and a verb, that contain one idea. Okay, so we will see how it is. In this case, this was the main point, right? That these vehicles are safer than usual cars. So we just gotta paraphrase that in our first sentence. We're gonna say, the article starts by stating that, and here we will say, driverless cars are safer than usual cars, right? So we can write that if you want, or I don't know if you guys have some ideas on how to paraphrase that, how to say it. Okay, let's just say, the article starts by stating that autonomous cars are, or let's respect the tenses, right? And this is something important as well that I was gonna say. You have different types of articles, we said, right? And different types of material here. In this case, if you think about it, this is something that is probably gonna happen in the future, right? This is not something that's going on right now. So if you look at the tenses, all of them are in the future tense, right? These vehicles will be safer, they will have a positive impact, they will reduce traffic problems, they will be able to start and stop their engines less often, they will give passengers time. So everything's in the future tense. That means that it's a plan for the future, right? What does this mean? When these autonomous cars are on the roads, they will be safer, they will reduce traffic, they will have a lot of advantages. So let's respect those tenses, okay? We're not gonna say they are safer, we're gonna say they will be safer. But another way to show grammar is by using different tenses, different modal verbs when you're using the future, right? So we can maybe interchange a few of them. We can use will, simple future, we can use be going to, we can use modal verbs, might, may, I don't know. There are more, right? Might, may, could. So we can maybe use some of them so that we don't use the same. And another structure that's also very good for grammar when it comes to the future is using the verb to be, right? So for example, I don't know if you guys know this grammar, I don't know, this grammar structure. It's not something that you really see, but it's a structure that is correct. So one way to also form the future is by saying autonomous cars are to be much safer, for example, right? So you use the verb to be. So autonomous cars are to drive more efficiently, are to save a lot of time, are to reduce traffic accidents. So that's another structure that you guys, if you're comfortable with it, you can use it, right? But if not, we can just use other. We can say are going to be much safer or are going to increase passenger safety, maybe. Okay. Okay, let's say passengers and public safety. Okay, because it's not just for passengers, right? The public safety. Okay, guys. So that's it, right? This is the main point from the reading, that these cars are safer than normal cars. Now, as I was telling you before, if you want, you can explain a little bit, but it has to be just one sentence. As I was telling you, you can have two clauses, but it has to be only one sentence. What do I mean by clauses? This is one clause on its own, because it has a subject, autonomous cars. It has a verb, are going to increase. All of this is a verb. And this is the object, right? The complement. No worries about that. And it's one idea on its own, right? If I want, I can add one more clause, sorry. So for example, I could say, autonomous cars are going to increase passengers and the public safety since or as they are not prone to error, for example, right? Which is basically what the reading says, right? That they're not prone to error because they're not humans, right? Humans make mistakes, but machines don't. Basically, that's what the reading says. So as you can see, this here is another clause because it has another subject, another verb, and another complement. And it's another idea, right? This is one idea and the second idea. I have two clauses in this sentence. You can do that if you want, but it cannot be, it can be more than that. So you can never have 3 clauses or 4 clauses for the first sentence. Okay, guys? You can obviously change a few things, but let's leave it there. Any questions so far? Okay. And then we are already done with the first part, the article's first point. Second thing we need to do is contrast that point with the professor's response. So explain how the professor responded to that point. We're going to say, nevertheless, in the presentation, it is noted that, and here we will summarize the professor's response to that. So you guys have your notes. What do I write? Remember, the professor here said that these cars, even though they are machines, they are designed by humans, right? So if humans can make mistakes, then when they are the ones that design these cars, then the cars may also make mistakes. And we also had an example, right? So how do I say that? How do I phrase it? In the presentation, it is noted that
Here, I have a question. For example, could I start saying, like in the presentation, it is noted that driverless cars are not as safe as they sound, for example, or should I include directly, the reason because they are made by humans. So yeah,
okay.
have
Both are okay. Usually there's 2 ways to present information. So you have like 2 different structures. You can go from the general idea and then to the details. So it's the way that you're saying, right? Start by saying, nevertheless, in the presentation, it's noted that these cars are not actually as safe as the author claims. So that's the main idea. They're not safe. And then go with the evidence and the details of why, right? And explain that they are designed by humans, give the example, give all the evidence. That's one way you can do it. Or if you want, you can do the opposite as well and say, start with the details, start with the evidence, and say in the presentation, it's noted that these cars are designed by humans. Plus, there was an accident involved with these cars. And then you can say, as a result, these cars are not as safe as the reading suggests, for example. So both ways are perfectly fine. What I suggest is that you combine them. So let's say in the first one, you're gonna start with the general idea and then give the details. Maybe in the second body paragraph, you can do the opposite so that you change the structure a little bit. But both are okay. So what do we say?
Maybe that these cars will be designed by humans too.
Okay. Okay.
And
These cars will be designed by humans, you can say, meaning they are just as, or they will be maybe meaning that it will be just as capable of errors as humans are, maybe, I don't know. Or meaning they are likely going to okay, something like this, right? Meaning they may likely be prone to error too. And prone to error too. And could even cause could cause just as many accidents. Okay, something like this, right? Those are the ideas. These cars are designed by humans, meaning that they might be prone to error and could equally cause accidents. Now, in this case, as I told you, this is the first part, right? We're summarizing the professor's point. So let's highlight it in this color. This is the main professor's point, right? Well, actually, not really. The main thing is that these cars are not safe, right? But don't worry if you change the order of these two elements, right? As I was telling Matilde before, you can first start with the evidence and then summarize the main point, or start with the main point and then go with the evidence. So in this case, this is obviously not always going to be the case. You won't always have examples, but in this particular lecture, we did have an example, right? When you have examples, when you have any type of evidence, then make sure that you explain or you give that evidence in the response. And I'm only talking about the listening. If you have examples or evidence from the reading, then skip that evidence because you don't need to mention any details. The way that you have to approach this is include details from the listening, but skip the details from the reading, okay? The reading, the only thing that you get from the reading is the main ideas. But from the listening, you have to be very detailed. So we have some points here, but we also had an example about the car that was mentioned in the article, right? So we're also going to include that example in the second or in the third sentence. So what do we say? It was about that car that drove, I don't know, over 700,000 miles, supposedly without an accident, right? But it actually caused an accident. It hit another car. So we have to write that down. How do we do that? For example,
one of these cars can hit another, could be.
good. But the way that you're saying it sounds like it's not something that actually happened, right? You're talking about a possibility. One of these cars can hit another, but it's actually something that happened, right? So you cannot use can for possibility. So we can say one of these cars hit another car, right? Being affirmative about it. But let's be a little bit more specific. And instead of saying one of these cars, let's point out that it was the car that was mentioned by the author, right? So we're gonna say, for example, it is explained, or it is mentioned, that this self-driving car used, or it is explained that the self-driving car mentioned by the author actually hit another car, right? But let's not say actually because we already used it. So, not surprisingly, recently hit another car, causing a major. Okay, so we can give more details. I don't know, like the fact that it was over the news or whatever, but it's okay if you just mention the example, right? It is explained that the self-driving car mentioned by the author recently hit another car, causing a major accident. In fact, okay. So this is the evidence, right? This is the explanation, the evidence. These are the details for the professor's point. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yes.
This example, we have to use the article examples or the lecture examples?
The lectures examples. Now, in this case, I am saying mentioned by the author because the professor and the author, that means the listening and the reading, use the same example. So I'm referring to the example mentioned by both. But in this case, I am talking about what the professor said, right? I am not saying, for example, there's a car that drove over 700,000 miles without having any accidents, because that's what the reading said. But instead, I'm saying what the professor said, right? The professor said that that car actually hit another car, had an accident. So you have to mention the examples and the details mentioned by the professor in the lecture. In this case, it can be a little bit confusing because it was the same example for both, but I am tending towards what the professor said, right? The information the professor gave. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you, Andrea.
Any other question? Okay, and finally, we can have one more sentence where we close the paragraph. And honestly, I would definitely love to hear or read the word safe or safety, because at the end of the day, this thing is about safety, right? And the contrast that we want to make is saying that the article says these cars are safer, but the professor says they are not safer, right? That's the main thing we want to do here. So even though we have gone around the main point, it's important that we mention the keyword as well. So maybe to close the paragraph, we can say, hence, the professor questions the safety of driverless cars or of such these cars. Okay, so we can say something like this: the professor questions the safety of these cars, or maybe the professor questions how safe these cars are, right? Or the professor questions whether these cars are safer than normal ones or not. Okay, but the important thing is that we mention the word safety. Or we can say, hence the professor concludes these cars are not safer than normal cars, or are not as safe as the reading mentioned, right? There are many ways we can phrase this. But the idea is that we contrast the two of them, right? We contrast the reading's main point with the professor's main point. Is that okay? Any questions so far? Okay, guys. So let's continue then. I'm gonna paste this here. Okay, guys. And basically what you gotta do for the other paragraphs, for the other body paragraphs, is exactly the same. You have to follow the same structure. One sentence for the reading, 2 or 3 sentences for the listening, making sure that you contrast the two ideas. Okay, so for example, in this case, the second point is about the environment. So we would say, furthermore, the author also points out that, remember, this is the reading part, so we will say, the author also points out that autonomous cars, or that the technology behind autonomous cars, make driving more efficient, or makes them be more efficient, maybe? Makes them more efficient than usually when normal vehicles. Thus, contributing to the reduction of pollution, right? Or maybe contributing to the environment's protection. Something like this. But the important thing is that we mentioned the environment, right? That they're good for the environment. I'm trying to paraphrase it so that it's not so copy and paste. But at the end of the day, we're saying the same, right? The author points out that these vehicles are good for the environment because they drive more efficiently, right? So as we can see, we have one sentence. I know that it's a long sentence, but it's one sentence and it has 2 clauses, right? We have the main point and we have some explanation about why, right? Because they're more efficient. Is it okay so far? Any questions? Okay, guys, please give me a second. All right, guys, thank you. So this is the first sentence where we summarize the readings part. And then we contrast and we say, on the other hand, the professor explains, and here we gotta talk about the professor's point now, right? So how does the professor respond to this argument of the environment? What does the professor say?
Maybe the demand for cars could increase since it will be available to more people, causing air pollution to increase. For example, people who are minors will no longer need a license.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Adri, but a little bit slower maybe. Demand for these cars will increase, right? Will be high.
Yes.
You too? Or what did you say, Adri?
Since it will be available to more people, causing air pollution to increase.
Okay, demand for these cars will be high. Since as there are no restrictions. There are no restrictions. There are no age restrictions, right? Because there won't be actually, right? So they will not be any age restrictions for getting a driver's license. On the other hand, the professor explains demand for these cars will be high once they are in the market, as there will not be any age restrictions for getting a driver's license. As a result, or in this way, having more cars on the roads might actually, but unfortunately, increase pollution levels rather than reducing. Okay, so this is it, right? The professor explains demand for these cars will be high once they are in the market, as there will not be any age restrictions for getting a driver's license. Here you could mention the details as well, right? The way that Adi was saying, we could say, to illustrate, minors and the elderly people will be able will be seen, we can say driving, will be seen the roads, right? And let's just say, in this way, an increase in the number of cars might unfortunately mean or cause, unfortunately, make pollution levels go up rather than reduce them. Okay, so I'm changing a little bit so that I include the example and give as many details, right? On the other hand, the professor explains the demand for these cars will be high once they are in the market, since there will not be any age restrictions for getting a driver's license. This is the evidence, right? Because the main point is about the environment. And then I am explaining a little bit more, giving details. So to illustrate, minors and the elderly people, minors and elderly people will be seen on the roads, right? Will probably be seen on the road. Will very soon be seen on the roads. In this way, an increase in the number of cars may unfortunately make pollution levels go up rather than reducing them. Right, so I'm saying the same thing. These cars are not really going to be good for the environment because pollution levels will actually increase due to the high number of cars on the roads. Right? So is this okay? As you can see, it's exactly the same as I did in the previous one. I have one sentence for the reading and I have 3 sentences for the listening where I explain in detail what was mentioned by the professor. Right? I'm trying to use transitions, as you can see here. I am trying to use, well, I am using the correct verb tenses. Everything's in the simple present, but I'm trying to include some modal verbs. I'm trying to keep my vocabulary somewhat extent, right? Although it could always be better. And I am also, as you can see, using a lot of, and this was a tip that I wanted to give you guys, use a lot of adverbs, okay? These are called adverbs, and they are really great to improve vocabulary. It just makes it sound more advanced in a way, okay? So things like unfortunately, recently, actually, equally, surprisingly, those words are great for improving your vocabulary or expanding your vocabulary very quickly. If you add like 3 or 4 of those in your essays, then they're a good way of showing vocabulary. Okay, it's like a quick win, a quick method of expanding your vocabulary. Is that okay? Any questions so far?
I also noticed that you don't use contractions, right? Because this is formal writing, so yeah, okay.
Exactly, good point, Matilde. Yes, thank you. Also, do not use contractions. Try not to use them. It's not I mean, it's not wrong to use them, but let's keep in mind that this is, as Matilde said, this is academic writing. So you want to be as formal as you can be. Try not to use contractions, and try to be careful with the way you're using punctuation as well. Punctuation makes a lot of difference. So make sure that you study how to use punctuation with transitions, for example, right? Here I'm using a semicolon before the transition. Here I'm using a period before it. Always with a comma after the transition word, right? Commas before words like as, seems, given that, for. So try to make sure that you check out punctuation rules as well. Anything else? Any other question? Okay, guys, perfect. So the last paragraph is exactly the same. Finally, the author mentions. And then we talk about the third point, right, which is time. So I won't do that. You guys can finish the essay if you want. But what I want to say is I want to talk about, well, first thing, try to always put indentation. Indentation is this blank space that you leave every time that you start a new paragraph, right? I don't know, some keyboards have it, some keyboards don't. So I don't know if you will have it or not, depending on where you take the test, right? If you take it at home, then probably you have that option. But even if you take the test in a test center, you can just do it manually, right? And leave some space before starting each paragraph. And that's just format. You know, it does not, it's not really because it will like give you any extra points or anything, but it's just the format that as a whole matters, you know. It's not that every single point matters, but format as a whole does matter, right? So you don't want to write everything in one single paragraph, because it won't be an essay. So I wanted to talk about that. And second thing, about the conclusion. Technically speaking, you don't need a conclusion. And if I were you, I wouldn't really waste time doing it. What I would do if you guys finish on time and you actually have some extra time to do something else, to make some changes, then I will try to review. I would try to see the grammar part, the vocabulary, content, improve a few sentences, because remember that, and you're gonna realize this when you practice. When you practice, you're gonna see how good you are with time. If you feel that 20 minutes is not enough and you're running out of time, then you know that it's time for you to practice, and you just need to write everything down, everything that comes to your mind without correcting, right? Right now we were correcting as we went. I was correcting as I went, right? I was changing a few things. But honestly, that's not a good thing for you guys to do. When you're actually writing this essay, the best strategy is to just write with nonstop. So don't stop to correct yourself, even if you're making some grammar errors, even if you're not using the best vocabulary you could. Try to just write and finish the essay. And once you're done, you can go back and make a few changes. Reread your essay, see that everything's the way you want. And if you still have some extra time, then yeah, you can go with a conclusion. What do you do in the conclusion? I mean, first, let's start by talking about the don'ts, the things that you should not do in the conclusion. First, don't include anything new. Don't include your opinion, okay? You don't have to say about, like, you don't have to say anything about what you think about this topic, right? Whether these cars are good or not. So don't write anything about your opinion. Don't write any recommendations, like, I think that people should start using these cars. Don't include anything about any details in general, right? So you cannot start talking about this specific example or about minors and the elders driving. Don't include any details. But what you can do in the conclusion is summarize everything that you wrote. That means summarize the 3 reasons or the 3 points and the main points from the professors and reading and the author's view, right? So for instance, this is the third body paragraph, right? This is not the conclusion. This is the third body paragraph. But if you were to write a conclusion, you can do something like this and say, in conclusion or in summary, to sum up, there's many transitions you can use for the conclusion. So in conclusion, And here, you can start by summarizing the main points, right? Try not to go over like point by point the way we did here in the body, because that's what you do in the development of the essay, right? Not in the conclusion. The conclusion is just a summary of everything that was mentioned. And you can say in conclusion, the professor and author discuss, or maybe you can say debate around the safety, debate around the impact of driverless cars, right? And then we can say, argue or topics by discussing, by discussing topics such as safety, the impact on the environment, maybe we could say, as their safety, their effect on the environment, and maybe we can say the response from, or the use, or the response from the users, right? And this is related to time, right? Or maybe we can say, and how users will manage the time. And how users will manage the time saved by this new technology. Right. So what I'm doing is I'm summarizing the points without saying exactly what the professor and the author say about it, right? I'm not saying the professor says these cars are not safer. The professor says these cars are not good for the environment. The reading says that these cars, that people will save a lot of time. I'm not doing that. That's what you did here in the body. In the conclusion, you just summarize and briefly mention what the points were, right? And that's why I told you not to mention them here, because if you want to go with a conclusion, that's what you're going to do in the conclusion. So the professor and author debate around the impact of driverless cars by discussing, or by addressing, I think would be better, by addressing issues or topics such as safety, their effect on the environment, and how users will manage the time saved by this new technology, right? And then as a final sentence, you can say, it is clear that maybe the academics will have present opposing views on the matter, and we'll have a hard time coming to an agreement. Right? So again, I'm not going into the details about who's in favor of what. I'm just summarizing it very, very superficial, right? And that's what you guys can do in the conclusion. But to be honest, it's not necessary, and you will just waste time thinking about what to say. This is just something that you do in case you really had extra time and you don't know how to use the time. But if you wanna, like, if there are some things that you wanna correct from your essay, then it's way better to correct those things rather than focusing on a conclusion. Okay, guys? And this is it. This is the essay. What do you guys think? If you think about it, you can use this as a template as well, right? Because you can use it with no matter what topic you get. The professor and author debate around, and here you place the topic by addressing topics such as, and here you talk about the 3 reasons or the 3 points. And this is just a phrase that you can always use, you know, so it's something you can use no matter what you have. Is it okay? Any questions? No questions? Okay, guys. Then please don't forget the daily survey before you go. And I will be sending you guys an assignment via our WhatsApp group chat. I'll be doing it tonight after my, well, I have another class right now. So I'll be doing that after my second class. And it's basically just gonna be an essay for you to write. Okay, and you'll have to send it to me and I'll be giving you guys some feedback. Don't worry about the details. I'll be sending all the details through in the text that I sent. Okay, guys?
When's the due date for that assignment?
It's probably gonna be Wednesday. For our practice session on Wednesday, yes. Okay.
We have sent essay a complete essay.
Yeah, you do have to write a complete essay. I will be sending you both the article and the lecture for you to hear. And you will have to write the essay trying to use this template here, you know, that we used in class.
Okay, thank you, Andrea.
I think. You guys, then I see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.